twin sisters, carrying a newborn they found in a dumpster, went to a young billionaire's mansion and said, "Please let us be your maids." Surprisingly, what he did next shocked everyone. The rain was merciless as it poured over the city, turning the streets into raging rivers. In the midst of this downpour, two small figures walked side by side, their shadows blending with the darkness of the night. Emily and Sophia, 7-year-old twins, trudged forward with great effort, their soaked clothes clinging to their frail bodies. 3 weeks. That was how long it had been since their lives were brutally turned upside down. The car accident that took their parents still echoed in their minds like a recurring nightmare. 2 weeks ago, they were forced to leave the only home they had ever known, evicted without mercy from a place they could no longer call their own. Sophia squeezed her sister's hand tighter, feeling the tremor running through Emily's body. They were exhausted, hungry, and completely lost. The adult world, so vast and intimidating, seemed to conspire against them every step of the way. That was when a weak cry, almost imperceptible amid the sound of the rain, caught Emily's attention. She stopped abruptly, pulling Sophia toward a dark alley on the right. "Did you hear that?" Emily whispered, her eyes wide as she searched the darkness. Sophia nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. The cry came again, clearer this time. The twins crept forward cautiously, guided by the sound, to a pile of soaked cardboard boxes. There, wrapped in old, dirty blankets, was a baby. Its blue eyes glistened with unshed tears, its tiny face red from a silent cry. Sophia, remembering the lessons from her mother, who had worked as a nurse, approached carefully. Her small, trembling hands touched the baby's forehead, feeling the heat of fever. "He's sick, Emily," Sophia murmured, worry evident in her voice. "We can't leave him here." Emily looked around, desperate. There was no one in sight, no sign of who could have abandoned such a defenseless little one. "We'll take him with us," Emily decided, her voice firm despite her fear. "We need to find help." Gently, Sophia picked the baby up, holding him against her chest. The little one calmed down a bit, snuggling into the warmth of the girl's body. The twins resumed their walk, now with renewed purpose. The rain continued to fall, but they barely noticed, focused on protecting the precious bundle in their arms. It was when they turned a corner that they saw it, an imposing mansion on a hill, its lights shining like a beacon in the stormy night. Emily and Sophia exchanged a hopeful glance. "Over there," Emily pointed. "Maybe we can ask for help." The path up to the mansion seemed endless. Their bare feet slipped in the mud and the biting wind whipped their faces. But they persisted, driven by the need to save the baby and find shelter. Finally, they reached the huge front door. Emily, summoning all the courage she had, raised her hand and knocked 3 times. Inside the mansion, John, a 28-year-old man, was hunched over piles of papers in his study. The late hour didn't bother him. Work was his refuge, a way to escape the loneliness that filled the massive, empty house. The sound of knocking on the door caught him by surprise. Frowning, John glanced at the clock. Who could be knocking at that hour of the night, in the middle of a storm? Intrigued and a little uneasy, John went down the stairs and opened the door. The scene before him left him speechless. Standing there were 2 identical girls, soaked to the bone, their dark hair stuck to pale faces, and in one girl's arms, a baby bundled in filthy blankets. "Please, sir," Emily said, her voice trembling with cold and fear. "We need help." John was frozen for a moment, unable to process what he was seeing. The girls looked as if they had walked out of a dark fairy tale, lost and desperate. "Come in," he finally managed to say, opening the door wider. "You'll catch pneumonia if you stay out there." The twins stepped in hesitantly, their wide eyes taking in the luxurious foyer. John closed the door behind them, shutting out the howling wind. "What happened to you?" he asked, his voice gentle so as not to frighten them. "Where are your parents?" Emily and Sophia exchanged a look filled with pain. Sophia was the one who answered, her voice almost a whisper. "They died 3 weeks ago." John's heart clenched in his chest. He knelt down to be at their eye level, noticing the bruises on their arms and the deep circles under their eyes. "And the baby?" he asked, looking at the small bundle in Sophia's arms. "We found him," Emily explained, abandoned in an alley. He's sick and he needs help. John opened his arms, and after a moment of hesitation, Sophia handed him the baby. He pulled back the blankets from the infant's face, feeling the feverish warmth. He needs a doctor, John muttered, more to himself than to the girls. That was when Emily took a step forward, her eyes gleaming with a surprising determination for someone so young. "Sir," she began, her voice steady despite her shivering, "we can work for you." In exchange for shelter. John looked at her, surprised. "Work? But you're only children." Emily shook her head as though age was just a minor detail. "We know how to do lots of things. We can clean, cook, take care of the garden. Our mom taught us." She began listing their skills, her voice gaining confidence with each word. "We can iron clothes, wash dishes, dust. Sophia is great with plants, and I learned how to bake cakes. We don't need any pay, just a place to stay. And food." John felt a lump form in his throat. The courage of these girls, their determination to survive in a world that had abandoned them, was heartbreaking. He knew what he should do. The proper legal thing would be to call the authorities. Report the abandoned children and the baby. But something inside him rebelled at the idea. John looked at the baby in his arms, at the twins trembling with cold and exhaustion, and he made a decision that would change his life forever. "You can stay," he said softly. "At least for now. We'll take care of you and the baby." Relief flooded the girls' faces immediately and overwhelmingly. Tears began streaming down Sophia's cheeks, while Emily let out a stifled sob. "Thank you, sir," Emily whispered, her voice choked. "We promise we'll work hard." John shook his head, a sad smile on his lips. "Don't worry about that now. Let's take care of you first." He stood up, still holding the baby, and called for his housekeeper. Mrs. Margaret appeared quickly, her eyes widening at the unusual sight. "Margaret, prepare the guest room," John instructed. "And bring dry clothes for the girls. I'll call Dr. Thompson. We need him to come examine this baby." Margaret, recovering from her initial surprise, nodded and hurried off to do as she was told. John turned to the twins, who watched him with a mix of gratitude and apprehension. "Come," he said gently. "Let's get you comfortable." As they climbed the stairs, John couldn't help thinking about how much his life had changed in just a few minutes. He, who had always lived alone, was now responsible for 3 children. The idea was terrifying, yet somehow strangely reassuring. The following hours went by in a blur of activity. Dr. Thompson arrived and examined the baby, diagnosing a mild pneumonia and prescribing antibiotics. The twins were bathed, dressed in warm, dry clothes, and fed a comforting soup hastily prepared by Margaret. It was past midnight when John finally managed to put Emily and Sophia to bed. The girls shared the king-size bed in the guest room, their small bodies looking even tinier amid the silk sheets. "Rest," John murmured, pulling the covers up over them. "You're safe now." He turned to leave, but Emily's soft voice stopped him. "Mr. John." "Yes, Emily? Is the baby going to be okay?" John smiled, touched by the genuine concern in the girl's voice. "Yes, he'll be fine. He's getting the care he needs. You saved his life, you know." Emily nodded, her eyes already heavy with sleep. "That's good," she murmured, before finally giving in to exhaustion. John stood there for a moment, watching the 2 sleeping girls. Their faces, now clean and fed, seemed so serene, so innocent. It was hard to believe what they had gone through, the courage they had shown. Exiting quietly, John headed to the improvised nursery where the baby was resting. The little one slept soundly, his chest rising and falling in a smooth rhythm. John gently touched his forehead, relieved to feel that the fever had dropped. Sitting in an armchair beside the crib, John let out a long, weary sigh. His mind whirled with the implications of what had happened that night. He knew that taking in the children was, at best, legally questionable, but looking at the sleeping baby and thinking of the 2 girls safely resting, he couldn't bring himself to regret his decision. The future was uncertain. John had no idea how he would handle 3 children or how he would explain the situation to the outside world. But he knew, with a certainty that surprised him, that he would do whatever it took to protect these little souls who had found their way to his door. Outside, the storm continued to rage. But inside the mansion, a new kind of calm had settled in. A calm born of unspoken promises, newly formed bonds, and renewed hope. John closed his eyes, allowing himself a moment of rest. Tomorrow would be a new day, full of challenges and uncertainty. But for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel so alone. The mansion, once cold and empty, now sheltered the warmth of an unlikely family. And on that first night, as the rain fell outside, 4 hearts beat in unison, united by fate and compassion. The morning sun filtered through the guest room curtains where Emily and Sophia slept soundly. Their faces, once marked by exhaustion and worry, now displayed a serenity they had long forgotten. Yet even in sleep, the memories of their recent past haunted their dreams. Emily stirred restlessly, her mind drifting back to that fateful day, just over 2 weeks ago. The neighborhood they lived in, once full of life and children's laughter, now resembled a battleground. Moving trucks lined the narrow streets as families hurriedly loaded their belongings. The air was charged with a mix of anger, sadness, and resignation. "Emily, Sophia, come help with these boxes," called their mother, Sarah, from the living room. The twins ran inside and, finding the familiar living room turned into a maze of cardboard boxes and furniture draped with sheets. "But, Mom," Sophia protested, "why do we have to leave? This is our home." Sarah sighed, crouching down to the girl's level. Her eyes, usually bright and cheerful, were shadowed by deep circles. "I know, sweetheart," she said gently, "but sometimes things change, even when we don't want them to. Remember what I always say, home is wherever we are together, no matter the place." At that moment, the door opened and Thomas, the girl's father, walked in. His face was tense, but he forced a smile when he saw his daughters. "Hey, my little ones," he said, gathering them in a hug. "How about one last playtime in the backyard before we go?" The girls nodded enthusiastically, running outside. Thomas exchanged a worried glance with Sarah before following them. In the backyard, the twins' laughter echoed, contrasting sharply with the grim atmosphere of the neighborhood. Thomas pushed them on the makeshift swing he had built years ago, trying to memorize every smile, every giggle. "Hiya, Dad," Emily shouted, while Sophia closed her eyes, feeling the wind against her face. Sarah watched from the kitchen window, silent tears rolling down her cheeks. She knew these joyful moments were precious, a final glimpse of normalcy before the uncertain future that lay ahead. Their fun was interrupted by the shrill sound of a car horn. In the street, a man in a suit yelled from inside a fancy car. "You have 1 hour to get out, or we'll call the police." Thomas clenched his fists, his expression hardening. "Come on, girls," he said, forcing calm into his voice. "Time to go back inside." The next hours passed in a blur of frantic activity. Furniture was hastily loaded into a small rented truck, boxes piled on top of each other. The twins watched, confused and scared, as their lives were packed away before their very eyes. When the last item was loaded, Sarah gathered the family in the empty living room. Her eyes were red, but her voice was firm. "Remember, girls," she said, "we're a family. As long as we stick together, we can face anything." Thomas nodded, pulling everyone into a tight hug. For a moment, there in the middle of the vacant room that had been their home for so many years, they clung to one another like shipwreck survivors in a storm. The sound of shattering glass outside pulled them back to reality. Thomas looked out the window and saw men in suits entering the neighboring houses that were already deserted. "We have to go," he said urgently. Now, with one last look back, the family left the house. Emily and Sophia watched through the back window of the truck as their neighborhood, their whole world, disappeared into the distance. The following days were a whirlwind of cheap motels and desperate phone calls. Thomas and Sarah spent hours on the phone, searching for jobs and a new place to live. The twins tried to keep themselves occupied by drawing on scraps of paper or making up quiet games so as not to bother their parents. It was one morning, in a faded motel on the outskirts of the city, that Thomas received the call that seemed like a salvation. "An interview," he exclaimed, evident relief in his voice. "In a city a few hours from here. If I get the job, we can start over." Sarah hugged him, tears of hope in her eyes. The twins, sensing the change in the air, gave cautious smiles. "We'll all go," Sarah decided. "We can make it a little trip, show the new city to the girls." The trip began with a mood of cautious optimism. Thomas drove, his eyes fixed on the road, while Sarah consulted a map, planning their route. In the back seat, Emily and Sophia played quietly, faces pressed against the window, watching the changing scenery. It all happened so quickly. A tire blew out, the car spun, the sound of twisting metal, shattering glass, and then silence. Emily blinked, disoriented. Next to her, Sophia whimpered softly. Up front, their parents were motionless, too motionless. "Mom?" Emily called, her voice trembling. "Dad?" There was no answer. The distant sound of sirens pulled them back to reality. With a strength they didn't know they possessed, the twins managed to crawl out of the wrecked car. "We have to go," Sophia whispered, pulling her sister. "They'll separate us." It was a fear their parents had inadvertently instilled in them, stories of orphaned siblings split apart by the system, never to see each other again. In that moment of shock and grief, the idea of being taken away from each other was more terrifying than anything else. So they ran. They ran as they had never run before, their small legs fueled by fear and adrenaline. They ran until the sirens were only a distant echo, until their lungs burned and their legs shook. The following days were a nightmare of hunger, cold, and constant fear. The twins wandered the streets, sleeping in dark alleys, rummaging through trash for food. Every shadow seemed like a police officer ready to take them away. Every adult a potential threat. They learned quickly, learned to hide, to remain unnoticed, learned to identify the safest places to sleep, the best times to scavenge for food, and above all, they learned to trust only each other. It was during this daily struggle to survive that they found the baby, a weak cry in a dark alley, a life as fragile as their own. In that moment, something awakened in the twins, a protective instinct, a sense of purpose. And now, here they were, in a luxurious mansion, with clean clothes and full stomachs. The transition was almost surreal. John watched the twins with a mixture of fascination and concern. They adapted surprisingly quickly to the new routine. Emily displayed a natural talent for organization, meticulously arranging the books in the library. Sophia, on the other hand, spent hours in the garden, softly talking to the plants as she watered them. But there were moments when John caught them anxiously watching the doors, as if expecting someone to come and take them away at any moment, or when a louder noise made them jump, eyes wide with fear. It was on one of those mornings, as he watched Emily rearrange the living room cushions for the third time, that John made a decision. He needed to know more. He needed to understand what these girls had gone through in order to truly help them. In his office, John called an old friend, an investigator he trusted. "Mark, it's John. I need a favor. A discreet investigation." Meanwhile, in their room, Emily and Sophia whispered to each other, heads close over a piece of paper. "We need a plan," Emily murmured. "For when, if we have to leave again?" Sophia nodded solemnly. "But maybe we won't have to." They looked out the window at the mansion's vast garden. For the first time in weeks, a small spark of hope glimmered in their eyes. In the makeshift nursery, the baby, now recovered and healthy, gurgled happily. John paused in the doorway, watching the twins take turns making funny faces at the little one. The past still echoed in the twins' haunted eyes, in the nightmares that sometimes woke them screaming in the middle of the night. But there, at that moment, there was also the promise of a future John was determined to make as bright as possible for these small souls entrusted to his care. The days in John's mansion turned into weeks, and little by little, Emily and Sophia began to adapt to their new routine. The imposing residence, which had initially intimidated them with its grand corridors and enormous rooms, gradually became more familiar. Emily, always methodical, found comfort in the mansion's vast library. Her small hands ran reverently over the spines of the books, arranging them by size and color. John frequently found her there, absorbed in a volume almost bigger than she was, her eyes shining with the magic of stories. "Emily, dear," John called one afternoon, watching her carefully stack a series of encyclopedias. "You don't have to organize everything, you know." The girl looked up at him, a small smile playing on her lips. "I like doing it, John. It makes me feel useful." John felt a pang in his chest. Even after weeks of care and comfort, the twins still carried the weight of their past, the need to prove their worth. Sophia, on the other hand, blossomed among the mansion's lush gardens. Under the watchful and slightly perplexed eye of the gardener, she spent hours among the flowers, whispering to them as if sharing secret knowledge. Her once hesitant hands now handled gardening tools with surprising skill. "Look, John," Sophia exclaimed one morning, proudly holding up a small pot. "I planted these daisies all by myself." John knelt beside her, admiring the delicate white petals. "They're beautiful, Sophia. You have a real gift." The radiant smile on her face lit her entire expression, and for a moment, John glimpsed the carefree child she could have been if fate hadn't been so cruel. The baby, whom everyone in the house affectionately called Little One, was growing strong and healthy. His cheerful babbles echoed down the corridors, bringing life to a mansion that had been silent for so long. During one of these moments spent caring for the baby, Mrs. Wilson, the cook who had worked in the house for decades, made an intriguing discovery. While changing Little One's diaper, her experienced eyes noticed something that made her freeze: a small birthmark, almost imperceptible, on the lower part of the baby's back. Her eyes widened in recognition, old memories surging in her mind. Just as quickly as the surprise came, she suppressed it, forcing herself to keep a neutral expression. "Is everything okay, Mrs. Wilson?" asked Emily, who was nearby, playing with some colorful blocks. The older woman forced a smile. "Yes, dear, I was just thinking how quickly Little One is growing." But inside, Mrs. Wilson was in turmoil. That mark, it was identical. But how could it be? After so many years, could it be possible? She shook her head, pushing away dangerous thoughts. Some things, she decided, were better left buried in the past. Meanwhile, the twins continued their cautious exploration of the mansion. Every day brought new discoveries: a music room with a grand piano, an attic full of mysterious trunks, a conservatory with exotic plants Sophia had never seen before. It was during one of these explorations that they came across a locked door on the third floor. It was a sturdy oak door, its dark wood contrasting with the light walls of the corridor. Emily placed her hand on the doorknob, testing it gently. "It's locked," she murmured, curiosity shining in her eyes. Sophia moved closer, examining the ornate lock. "What do you think is in there?" The girls exchanged speculative looks, their young minds buzzing with possibilities. Hidden treasure, a secret room. Or maybe... The sound of footsteps approaching interrupted their daydreams. Quickly, they stepped away from the door, pretending to be interested in a painting on the opposite wall. Jenkins, the butler, appeared in the corridor. His keen eyes narrowed slightly upon seeing the girls so close to the forbidden room. "Young ladies," he said, his voice as formal as ever, "your afternoon snack is served in the conservatory." The twins nodded, casting one last curious glance at the mysterious door before following Jenkins downstairs. Though their curiosity burned, something in the butler's tone and the general atmosphere of the house warned them against deeper investigation. For now. As for John, he found himself increasingly puzzled by his own reactions to the baby. There were moments when, holding Little One, he felt a connection so deep and inexplicable that it took his breath away. It was as if a missing piece of himself suddenly fell into place. One evening, while rocking the baby to sleep, John found his mind drifting. Gazing at Little One's peaceful face, he felt a surge of protectiveness and something else. Something he couldn't name, but which both scared and drew him in equal measure. "Who are you, Little One?" John whispered to himself more than to the sleeping baby. "And why do I feel like I should already know the answer?" The mansion, once so silent and empty, now buzzed with a different energy. The twins' laughter echoed down the corridors, and Little One's babbles filled the once void spaces. But along with this new life came a mounting tension among the staff. John began to notice subtle changes in the behavior of his older employees. conversations that stopped abruptly when he entered a room, furtive glances in the halls, a general sense of unease hanging in the air. One afternoon, walking past the kitchen, John overheard fragments of a whispered conversation between Mrs. Wilson and one of the younger maids. "But what if he finds out?" The maid's voice was an anxious murmur. "Shh," Mrs. Wilson scolded quietly. "Some things are better left in the past, Mr. John doesn't need to." John cleared his throat as he entered, and the two women broke apart quickly, pretending to be busy with their tasks. He feigned ignorance of the maid's blush or Mrs. Wilson's evasive look. As the weeks passed, the routine in the mansion established itself. The twins, once so out of place and apprehensive, now moved through the grand rooms with growing familiarity. They knew the best hiding spots for hide and seek, which armchair in the library was the comfiest for reading, and had even made friends with some of the younger staff. Emily, in particular, had developed a fascination with the mansion's history. She spent hours examining the old portraits on the walls, trying to decipher the stories behind the serious faces watching her. "John?" she asked one day, pointing to a particularly imposing portrait of a man who looked much like him. "Who's this?" John glanced at the painting, a shadow passing over his eyes. "That's my grandfather, Emily. He built this mansion." "Why does he look so sad?" the girl persisted, her keen perception picking up on the melancholy in the painted eyes. John hesitated, as though weighing his words. "Sometimes, Emily, people carry sadness we can't see or fully understand." The girl nodded thoughtfully, her gaze still fixed on the portrait. John wondered, not for the first time, how much the twins understood about the adult complexities surrounding them. Sophia, on the other hand, found her niche in the estate's vast gardens. She spent hours helping the gardener, learning the names of plants and flowers, discovering the joy of watching something grow under her care. "Look, John," she exclaimed one afternoon, running toward him with dirt-stained hands. "The tomatoes we planted are starting to bear fruit." John smiled, genuinely sharing in the girl's excitement. In those moments, he found himself wondering how his life had been before the twins and little one arrived. How had he filled his days in an empty mansion? The baby, meanwhile, was growing noticeably. His first smiles, his attempts to roll over on the bed, each little milestone was celebrated by everyone in the house. John found himself spending more and more time in the nursery, watching little one, feeling that inexplicable connection grow each day. During one such visit, John noticed something odd. Mrs. Wilson, who was changing the baby, appeared tense, her movements stiff, and she avoided meeting his eyes. "Is everything all right, Mrs. Wilson?" John asked, stepping closer. The cook gave a small jump, as if caught doing something wrong. "Yes, Mr. John, it's just that little one is growing so fast." John nodded, but couldn't help noticing how Mrs. Wilson's gaze remained fixed on a specific spot on the baby's back. Before he could question her further, however, she finished dressing the baby and hurried out of the room, muttering something about cookies in the oven. As the days went by, John noticed more and more of these strange little moments. Jenkins, the ever-composed butler, seemed constantly on the verge of saying something, only to hold back at the last moment. The maids exchanged meaningful looks when they thought no one was watching, and Mrs. Wilson, well, she seemed to be avoiding being alone with John at all costs. One night, unable to sleep, John found himself wandering the mansion's corridors. Almost without thinking, his steps led him to the locked door on the third floor. He stopped in front of it, his hand resting on the cold doorknob. For a moment, he considered opening it, facing the ghosts he knew were hidden inside. But then, the distant sound of little one's cry reached his ears, and John stepped away. Some truths, he decided, might be better left buried. At least for now. Returning to his room, John passed by the twins' bedroom. The door was ajar, and he couldn't resist peeking in. Emily and Sophia slept soundly, curled up together, seeking comfort in each other's presence, even in sleep. John felt his heart tighten with an emotion he couldn't quite name. Protection, affection, or something deeper, scarier in its intensity. Gently closing the door, John headed to his own room. Lying in bed, staring at the ornate ceiling, He couldn't help but think how drastically his life had changed in such a short time. The mansion, once a lonely refuge filled with painful memories, now hummed with new life. The twins' laughter, little ones' coos, even the palpable tension among the staff, all of it formed a complex tapestry of emotions and secrets John was still trying to unravel. As sleep finally claimed him, John wondered what the future held for this strange family fate had brought together. What secrets did the mansion still hide? And when those secrets finally emerged, how would they change their lives? With those turbulent thoughts, John drifted off, unaware that Emily's watchful eyes were on him from the slightly open door, her young, perceptive mind trying to piece together the puzzle of her new home. Morning in the mansion began as usual. John was having breakfast with the twins and little one when the sound of tires on the gravel drive broke the routine. Moments later, a familiar voice echoed through the hall. "Jenkins, where is my son?" John froze, instantly recognizing his mother's voice. Mary. He hadn't expected her, especially after months of traveling. Mary entered the dining room, elegant and imposing as always. Her sharp eyes scanned the room, stopping when she saw the children, revealing clear surprise. "John, dear," she said, her voice controlled, "what a surprise to find you with company." John stood to greet her. "Mother, we weren't expecting you. Weren't you supposed to be traveling for longer?" "I missed home," Mary answered, her gaze never leaving the children. "And who are these little guests?" John hesitated before replying. "Mother, these are Emily and Sophia, and this," he indicated the baby, "is little one." Mary stepped closer, her eyes never leaving the baby. For an instant, something flickered in her gaze. Recognition, fear. But it was gone so quickly, John almost thought he imagined it. "Fascinating," Mary murmured. "And where did these children come from, John?" The tension in her voice was palpable. John felt uncomfortable with the intensity of her interest. "It's a long story, Mother. Maybe we can talk about it later." Mary nodded, but her eyes stayed fixed on the baby. "Certainly, dear. We have much to discuss." In the days that followed, Mary's presence increased the tension in the mansion. Though polite with the children, she maintained a calculated distance, watching them with a gaze that combined curiosity and apprehension. Emily, always attentive, noticed the subtle shifts in the staff's behavior. Mrs. Wilson, once so affectionate, now avoided being alone with the children. Jenkins seemed perpetually nervous, as though harboring a heavy secret. One afternoon, Emily overheard a whispered conversation in the kitchen. "But what if Mrs. Mary finds out?" the maid murmured. "Mrs. Wilson replied, her voice tense. "Some truths are better left buried, for everyone's sake." At night, the twins often heard Mary on the phone, her voice lowered in urgent whispers. "Can't be a coincidence. They caught fragments one evening. After all these years, no, we can't allow..." John watched his mother with growing concern. She spent long periods alone, often in the library or wandering the gardens with a troubled expression. It was as though she bore an invisible weight that aged her day by day. One afternoon, Mary approached John in his office. "John, dear," she began, her voice carefully neutral, "have you considered other options for the children?" John looked at her, taken aback. "What kind of options, Mother?" "Well, there are excellent children's homes," Mary suggested, "places where they could receive proper care and education." "Mother," John interrupted firmly, "the children are fine here. They're part of the family now." Mary regarded him for a long moment. "Family," she repeated softly. "Yes, I suppose they are." As the days passed, Mary continued to ask seemingly casual questions about the children's origins. Her interest in little one was especially intense, her eyes always following the baby with a mixture of emotions John couldn't decode. "And you say you don't know anything about little one's parents?" she asked one evening, watching John put the baby to bed. "No, Mother. He was found." Mary made a thoughtful sound. "Interesting," she murmured. "Very interesting." The twins, sensitive to the change in the house's atmosphere, became quieter and more cautious. Emily, especially, kept a close eye on Mary, noticing how the older woman always seemed on the verge of saying something, only to hold back at the last second. One night, Emily was awakened by a sound in the hallway. Peeking through the door, she saw Mary standing at little one's bedroom, her hand raised to the doorknob but unable to touch it. "Oh, Thomas," Mary whispered to the empty air, "what have we done?" John also noticed the changes in his mother. More than once, he caught her gazing intently at little one, a look of pain and conflict on her face. One afternoon, he found her in the library, leafing through an old photo album. "Mother," he began hesitantly, "are you all right? You've seemed upset since you arrived." Mary closed the album abruptly. "Oh, John," she sighed, "there are so many things, so many stories you don't know." Before John could press further, Mary changed the subject, but he couldn't help noticing how her hands trembled as she put the album away. As the days went on, tension in the mansion reached a breaking point. The twins grew more reserved, little one more restless. John found himself torn between his desire to protect the children and his growing concern over his mother's behavior. One night, passing by Mary's bedroom, John heard her on the phone again. "We can't ignore this," she was saying. "If anyone finds out, no, we can't take the risk. We have to do something." The next morning at breakfast, Mary spoke, her voice slicing through the silence. "John, dear, I've been thinking. Perhaps it's time we consider the children's futures, their long-term future." John felt his heart pound. "What do you mean, Mother?" "Well, they can't stay here forever, can they? Maybe it's time we look for more permanent arrangements." The silence that followed was deafening. The twins looked at John, wide-eyed with fear. Little one began whimpering softly. John looked at his mother, then at the children. In that moment, he knew a decision had to be made, one that would change all their lives. "Mother," he finally said, voice firm, "I think we need to talk in private." Mary nodded, a hint of triumph in her eyes, but as she stood, she cast one last look at little one, a look full of conflicting emotions, fear, guilt, and something that looked almost like recognition. The office doors closed behind them, leaving the twins and little one in the dining room, the air heavy with unspoken secrets and decisions yet to be made. The future of this makeshift family hung by a thread, and no one knew what tomorrow would bring. Emily and Sophia were helping Mrs. Wilson in the kitchen, as they did every afternoon. The smell of freshly baked cookies filled the air, while the girls washed the dishes used for the preparation. Then they heard voices in the corridor, coming closer. "Shh," Emily whispered to her sister, "someone's coming." They fell silent, ears alert. The kitchen door was slightly ajar, and soon they recognized the voices of Mrs. Wilson and Jenkins, the butler. "I still can't believe Mrs. Mary returned," Jenkins was saying, his voice low and tense. "After everything that happened with young David." Mrs. Wilson let out a heavy sigh. "Oh, poor David, Mr. John's younger brother. What a tragedy." The twins exchanged startled looks. John had a brother. Why had they never heard of him? "It's been so many years," Jenkins went on. "But the way he vanished, and that baby—" "Shh," Mrs. Wilson interrupted sharply. "We shouldn't talk about that. You know what Mrs. Mary said." The voices faded away, leaving the girls wide-eyed and full of questions. "Emily," Sophia whispered, "do you think we should tell John?" Emily bit her lip, deep in thought. "Yes," she decided at last. "He needs to know." That night, after dinner, the girls asked to speak with John privately. In the office, they recounted everything they'd heard in the kitchen. John listened in silence, his face growing paler with each revelation. When they finished, he remained quiet for a long moment, his eyes fixed on a distant point. "John?" Emily asked hesitantly. "Are you okay?" John blinked as though emerging from a trance. Yes, he mumbled. "Thank you for telling me, girls. Now, why don't you go play for a bit before bedtime?" As soon as the twins left, John stood up abruptly. With determined strides, he climbed the stairs to the third floor, stopping before the door he had avoided for so long. With trembling hands, he took a key from his pocket, a key he had carried with him for years but never had the courage to use. The lock turned with a soft click, and the door opened. The room was exactly as John remembered it, the bed perfectly made, the books neatly placed on the shelves, the guitar in the corner, everything untouched, as though waiting for its owner to return. John entered hesitantly, the weight of memories hitting him like a wave. His eyes roamed over the room, finally landing on a wooden box atop the desk. Heart pounding, he opened the box. Inside, he found a leather-bound diary, and beneath it, a photograph. Carefully, John picked up the photo. It showed a smiling young man, David, holding a baby in his arms. The baby's face wasn't visible, but something in the image made John frown. Setting the photo aside, he opened the diary. The first pages were filled with everyday notes, but soon the tone changed. "I can't keep this secret anymore. What our family did, what I did, it's unbearable. But how can I tell the truth without destroying everything?" John kept reading, shock and disbelief etched on his face. Each page revealed more secrets, more lies, painting a picture he never could have imagined. When he finally closed the diary, hours had passed. John felt as though the ground had been pulled from beneath his feet. Everything he believed he knew about his family, about his brother, was now in question. With renewed determination, he slipped the diary and photo into his pocket. It was time to uncover the truth, no matter how painful it might be. The next morning, the twins immediately noticed the change in John. His eyes were shadowed with deep circles, and there was a new intensity in his gaze. "What do you think happened?" Sophia whispered to Emily. Emily studied John for a moment before responding, "I'm not sure, but I think it has something to do with what we told him." The two exchanged worried looks, sensing that something significant had shifted. Whatever John had discovered the previous night, it was clear nothing would ever be the same. John had barely slept since his discovery in David's room. At sunrise, he was already in his office, phone in hand. "Mike, it's John. I need your services again. It's a delicate matter." Mike was a private investigator John had hired a few times for company-related matters. His discretion was legendary, and John knew he could be trusted with this sensitive investigation. "Certainly, Mr. John. What is it this time?" John hesitated for a moment. "I need you to look into the past of two girls, Emily and Sophia, and any connection they might have to my company." "Understood, sir. I'll begin right away." Over the following days, John split his time between managing the company, caring for the children, and waiting anxiously for news from Mike. The twins noticed the changes in his behavior, the distant looks, the hushed phone calls. "Do you think he's mad at us for telling him what we heard?" Sophia asked Emily one evening as they got ready for bed. Emily shook her head. "No, I don't think so. He seems worried, like he's trying to solve a really hard puzzle." A week after hiring Mike, John received the first part of the report. With trembling hands, he opened the envelope in his office. The report detailed the car accident that had taken the lives of the twins' parents. A blown tire, the car spinning on a wet road, the fatal collision with a truck. John's heart tightened as he read the details, imagining the terror the girls must have felt. But it was the next section that made his blood run cold. The eviction of the twins' family wasn't an isolated case. The entire neighborhood they had lived in was being emptied to make way for a large real estate development, funded by his own company. The report slipped from John's grasp, and he felt suddenly nauseous. How was this possible? How could he not have known? In the following days, John immersed himself in the company's files, trying to understand how this had happened. The more he investigated, the more disturbed he became. The development project had been approved years earlier, but implementation had been delayed multiple times. The reasons for these delays were vague, but John began noticing a pattern. Each delay coincided with economic recessions or changes in local regulations. The connection between the twins' story and his own company's decisions began to form in his mind, and John didn't like the picture coming together. Meanwhile, the twins continued their own quiet investigation. They noticed subtle changes around the mansion, the whispered conversations that stopped when they entered a room, worried looks exchanged by the staff, the growing tension between John and Mary. During one of these afternoons, while helping in the laundry room, they overheard something that caught their attention. "Five, what if he discovers something about the Oakwood project?" One of the maids' voices reached them. "Shh," Mrs. Wilson warned. "I've told you, Don't mention that name here. Emily and Sophia exchanged puzzled glances. What was the Oakwood project, and why was it a secret? John, for his part, continued his investigation with near-obsessive determination. Each new discovery seemed to raise more questions than answers. The real estate development plan, he discovered, had initially been proposed as a neighborhood revitalization. But at some point, the plans had changed, becoming more aggressive and less considerate of local residents. Mike kept sending regular reports, each one bringing more pieces to the puzzle. The investigator had uncovered irregularities in the process of evicting the neighborhood's families, short deadlines, inadequate compensation, lack of transparency. Everything pointed to an inexplicable rush to empty the area. John felt his stomach twist with each new revelation. How could his company, his father's proud creation, be involved in something like this? One afternoon, unable to contain his frustration, John called an emergency meeting with the company's board of directors. The tension in the conference room was palpable as he began revealing his findings. "Gentlemen," John began, his voice trembling slightly with repressed emotion, "I've discovered some irregularities in our Oakwood development project. I'd like some explanations." The silence that followed was deafening. Board members exchanged nervous glances until finally Mr. Thompson, the oldest among them, cleared his throat. "John, my boy," he began, his condescending tone immediately irking John, "you need to understand that sometimes, for progress, certain hard decisions must be made." John felt his face flush with anger. Hard decisions? Is that what we're calling forced evictions and inadequate compensation now? The meeting quickly fell apart after that, with arguments flying from all sides. When John finally left the room, it was clear a line had been drawn. On one side stood him, determined to uncover the truth and correct past wrongs. On the other side was the board, equally determined to carry on with the project as planned. That night, after putting the twins to bed, John locked himself in his office with David's diary. His brother's words, written years ago, seemed to echo his own discoveries and dilemmas. "I can't ignore the impact of our decisions anymore," David had written. "The human cost is too high, but how can I change the course of something so large?" John felt a lump in his throat as he read these words. His brother had faced the same conflict he faced now, loyalty to the company versus doing what was morally right. As he went deeper into the diary, John noticed increasing references to the Oakwood project. David had initially been enthusiastic about the idea, seeing it as a chance to improve the neighborhood. But over time, his tone changed, becoming more critical and worried. "The Oakwood project is no longer about revitalization," David wrote in one entry. "It's become something else, something I can no longer support in good conscience." John frowned, feeling he was on the brink of a vital revelation. What exactly had David discovered about the project? Days turned into weeks, and John's investigation continued. Each new discovery seemed to lead to more questions, more shadowy connections between the company's past decisions and the twins' present situation. Mary, for her part, grew increasingly agitated. John often caught her looking at him with a mixture of worry and resignation, as though she knew it was only a matter of time before all the truths came out. One afternoon, while reviewing some old company documents, John stumbled onto something shocking. The Oakwood project wasn't just about real estate development. There was more, something involving hidden natural resources under the neighborhood. With trembling hands, John picked up the phone and called Mike. "I need you to look into something for me," he said, as soon as the investigator answered. "Search for any geological studies done in the Oakwood neighborhood over the past 10 years. While he waited for the results of this new line of inquiry, John continued reading David's diary. The entries became increasingly distressed, reflecting his brother's internal struggle. "I can't pretend I don't know anymore," David wrote in one particularly emotional entry. "What we're about to do, it's unforgivable. But how can I stop something that's already in motion?" A chill ran down John's spine as he read those words. He was beginning to understand the weight David had carried, the same weight now resting on his own shoulders. The twins, meanwhile, carried on their own quiet investigations. They had become experts at slipping through the mansion unseen, overhearing conversations and collecting clues. Though they didn't know the full scope of what was happening, they sensed something big was underway. Unbeknownst to the girls, John persisted with his search for truth. Mike's report on the geological studies arrived a few days later, and the revelations were staggering. Oakwood's underground, John found, was rich in a rare mineral essential for cutting-edge technology production. The company had discovered this years ago, and the real estate development was just a front to allow resource exploitation. John felt his world crumble as he read these revelations. Everything he thought he knew about the project, about the company's motivations, was tainted by lies and greed. With renewed determination, John decided it was time to confront the board once more. They had kept the truth from him for far too long, and now they had to answer for it. That evening, after the children had gone to sleep, John locked himself in his office, preparing for the battle he knew was coming. He gathered all the documents and evidence he'd collected over the past weeks. As he organized his thoughts, John couldn't stop thinking about the twins, about how their lives had been irreversibly changed by decisions made in boardrooms by men who would never know the real impact of their actions. With a heavy sigh, John opened David's diary once again, seeking strength in his brother's words. On the final page, an entry made him pause. There are times in a man's life when he must decide what kind of person he wants to be. Today is that day for me. No matter the cost, I can't remain complicit in this. It's time to do the right thing. John closed the diary, feeling a sense of resolve solidify within him. Tomorrow, he would face the board. Tomorrow, he would begin to right the wrongs of the past. But for now, he had two girls to comfort. John left his office and headed to the twins' room. Opening the door, he found Emily and Sophia sitting on one of the beds, whispering to each other. "Hey, you two," he said gently. "Shouldn't you be sleeping?" The girls jumped, looking guilty for a moment before relaxing when they saw it was John. "We couldn't sleep," Emily admitted. "There's so much going on," Sophia added. "Things we don't understand." John felt his heart tighten. He sat on the edge of the bed, pulling them both close. "I know," he said. "And I promise I'll explain everything when I can. For now, I need you to trust me, okay? I'm working to fix things." The girls nodded, their eyes filled with trust. John hugged them tight, feeling the weight of the responsibility he bore. "Now it's time to sleep," he said, tucking them into bed. "Tomorrow's another day." Leaving the room, John paused at the door, glancing back. Emily and Sophia were already whispering again, likely planning their next mission. He couldn't help but smile a little, despite the gravity of the situation. They were stronger and smarter than anyone realized. With one last look at the twins, John quietly closed the door and headed to his own room. Tomorrow would be long and challenging, but for the first time in weeks, he felt ready to face it. The future was uncertain, but one thing John knew for sure. No matter what happened, he would do everything in his power to protect Emily, Sophia, and little one. They were his family now, and for family, John was ready to face any obstacle. With that firm resolve in his heart, John finally allowed himself to rest, knowing that the real battle would begin in the morning. The weight of David's diary, the discoveries about the Oakwood project, and the fate of the displaced families, including the twins, weighed on his conscience. But now, more than ever, John was determined to do the right thing, whatever the cost. Tension in the mansion had reached a peak. Armed with the revelations from David's diary and his own investigation, John knew it was time to confront his mother. He found her in the library, flipping through an old photo album. "Mother," John said, his voice firm, "we need to talk." "About Lisa and David." Mary froze, and her face visibly paling. "John, No, Mother, no more evasions. I want the whole truth. Now." John led Mary into his office, closing the door behind them. The air was charged with tension and secrets on the brink of revelation. "Sit," John instructed, pointing to the chair in front of his desk. He remained standing, too restless to sit. Mary sat, her hands trembling slightly. "Where should I start?" "From the beginning. Who was Lisa? What really happened between her and David?" Mary closed her eyes, as though summoning courage. When she opened them, John saw decades of guilt reflected there. "Lisa was extraordinary," Mary began. "Smart, passionate, determined. Everything I was afraid might steer David away from the path we had planned for him. John listened intently, absorbing every word, as his mother unraveled the story of David and Lisa. They met in college, united by ideals of social justice and change. Lisa came from a middle-class family, without the connections or resources that the Thorntons had. David was mesmerized by her from the start, Mary continued. I saw the danger immediately. Lisa had ideas and dreams that didn't align with what we wanted for the company, for David's future. Mary described how the relationship flourished despite her subtle attempts to sabotage it. David and Lisa graduated, soon making plans for their future, a future that didn't include the Thornton family business. They wanted to start a non-profit organization, Mary revealed, her voice dripping with disdain. Waste David's talents and resources on charity work. John felt anger rising in his chest, and that was so terrible. Mary looked at him, surprised by his reaction. You don't understand, John. We had a legacy to protect, a reputation to uphold. At the cost of David's happiness, Mary averted her gaze, guilt evident in her face. I thought I was doing what was best for him, for our family. John pressed on, demanding more details. Reluctantly, Mary revealed how she manipulated events to drive the couple apart, intercepted letters, sabotaged Lisa's job opportunities, and spread rumors about infidelity. The final straw was when I found out Lisa was pregnant, Mary admitted, her voice barely a whisper. John felt as though he had been punched in the stomach. Pregnant. David was going to be a father. Mary nodded, tears forming in her eyes. I offered Lisa money to vanish, told her I'd ruin David's career, that he'd hate her for destroying his future. John couldn't believe what he was hearing. The image he had of his mother was shattering before his eyes. How could you? He asked, his voice trembling with anger and disappointment. I was scared, John, Mary exclaimed. Scared of losing everything we had built, of watching our name, our reputation crumble. And what happened then? John urged, dreading the answer. Mary wiped away a tear. Lisa refused the money. She said she loved David more than any fortune, so I lied to David. John felt his heart sink. What did you tell him? I said Lisa had taken the money, that she'd had an abortion and left, that it had all been a scheme to get money from the family. The silence that followed was deafening. John stared at his mother as though seeing her for the first time, horrified by the extent of her manipulation. David was devastated, Mary continued, her voice quavering. He threw himself into work, grew cold and distant. I thought that in time he would move on, that he'd understand everything I did was for him. John shook his head in disbelief. What about the baby? What happened to David's child? Mary hesitated, and John saw a flicker of fear, guilt, and regret in her eyes. I don't know, she finally admitted. Lisa disappeared after that. I hired people to look for her, but she was just gone. John sank into his chair, the weight of these revelations crushing him. He had a niece or nephew somewhere, a child who never knew their father, who grew up unaware of their true heritage. Why are you telling me this now? John asked, his voice weary. Mary's eyes filled with tears. Because I can't carry this alone anymore, John. Because I see you following David's footsteps, questioning the company, drifting away from everything we built. I can't lose another son. John felt a turbulent mix of emotions, anger, pity, disappointment, love. His mother, a woman he had always seen as a pillar of strength and integrity, had committed unforgivable acts in the name of what she believed was best for the family. Mother, he finally said, his voice resolute, what you did, it can't be justified. You stole David's chance to be a father, to have the life he wanted. You lied, manipulated, destroyed lives. Mary sobbed, covering her face with her hands. John pressed on, determined to say everything that needed saying. But you're still my mother, and despite everything, I know you acted out of fear. That doesn't make it right, but I understand the fear that drove you. Mary looked at him, hope shining in her tear-filled eyes. What do we do now, John? John walked to the window, gazing at the garden where Emily and Sophia were playing, unaware of the drama unfolding inside. "Now," he said, turning to face his mother, "we fix what we can. We find Lisa and my niece or nephew. We tell the truth, no matter how painful." Mary nodded slowly, a mixture of fear and relief on her face. "And the company," John thought for a moment. "The company needs major changes, Mother. We can't keep operating the way we have. It's time to honor David's original vision, use our resources to do good, not just to accumulate more wealth." Mary looked as though she wanted to protest, but she held back. She saw the resolve in John's eyes and knew it was futile to argue. "I'm scared, John," she admitted softly. John moved closer, placing a hand on his mother's shoulder. "So am I, Mother, but doing what's right is often scary. It's time we face the consequences of our actions and try to make amends." At that moment, a baby's cry echoed through the mansion. Little one had awakened from his nap. John and Mary exchanged a look, years of secrets and lies hanging between them. "Go," Mary said gently. "Take care of him. I need some time to think." John nodded, heading to the door. Before leaving, he turned back to his mother. "It's not too late to do the right thing, Mother. To be the family David always wanted us to be." With those words, John left, leaving Mary alone with her thoughts and regrets. As he climbed the stairs to tend to little one, John felt the weight of his new mission: find Lisa, reunite his broken family, and transform the Thornton legacy into something David would have been proud of. The path ahead would be difficult, filled with obstacles and painful truths. But for the first time in years, John felt he was finally on the right track. John barely slept the night after his mother's revelations. As soon as dawn broke, he was on the phone with Mike, the private investigator. "Mike, I need you to find someone. Lisa Thompson. She'd be around 40 now. She went to college with my brother David." "Understood, Mr. John. Anything else that might help?" John hesitated. She was pregnant when she disappeared. About 20 years ago." Mike processed that information silently. "I'll do my best, sir. I'll start right away." As John dived into a frantic search, Emily and Sophia sensed something important was happening. The atmosphere in the mansion was charged with tension and secrets. "We have to find out what's going on," Emily whispered to Sophia one afternoon. Sophia nodded, her eyes gleaming with determination. "Let's investigate." The girls began to roam the mansion, using their talent for moving unnoticed. It was in the attic, among dusty boxes, that they made a shocking discovery. "Emily, look at this," Sophia called, holding a yellowed envelope. Inside were documents linked to the real estate project that had evicted their family, and there, in clear letters, was the name of John's company as the one responsible. "This can't be," Emily murmured, her face pale. The twins felt their world spin. John, their benefactor, the man who had sheltered them, was responsible for their tragedy. The inner conflict was overwhelming. Meanwhile, John followed lead after lead in his search for Lisa. Each dead end left him more frustrated, yet even more determined. In quiet moments, John imagined what Lisa's life had been like after the forced separation. Had she raised the baby alone? Was the child, his niece or nephew, doing okay? Consumed by guilt, Mary finally decided to help in the search. One afternoon, she walked into John's office carrying an old box. "I found this," she said softly. "It's some of Lisa's things David kept. Maybe it'll help." John looked at his mother, seeing the regret in her eyes. "Thank you, Mother. This could make all the difference." Tension in the mansion grew by the day. Employees exchanged worried glances, feeling that something monumental was about to happen. Emily and Sophia, now aware of part of the truth, watched John with a mixture of fear and confusion. Finally, after weeks of tireless searching, Mike called with news. "Mr. John, I think we've found her. Lisa Thompson. She's living in a modest neighborhood about 200 miles from here." John's heart pounded. "You're sure?" "Almost certain, sir. Descriptions match, age matches, and there's a young woman living with her, around 20 years old." John closed his eyes, taking in the information. His niece or nephew. They existed. They were real. "Send me the address, Mike. I'm going myself." As he prepared for the meeting, John felt a whirlwind of anxiety and hope. How would Lisa react to seeing him? What would he tell her? How would he explain 2 decades of lies and absence? Heart heavy yet resolute, John headed to the garage. That was when he saw Emily and Sophia standing by the door, solemn expressions on their faces. "John," Emily said, her voice trembling slightly, "before you go, we need to talk." John looked at the girls, sensing yet another revelation. Whatever it was, he was ready to face it. It was time for all truths to come to light. John parked his car in front of a small apartment building in a modest neighborhood. His heart raced as he checked the address on a scrap of paper. This was the place. Lisa was here. With hesitant steps, he approached the door and rang the bell. Seconds felt like hours until, finally, the door opened. A woman with graying hair and tired but still bright eyes stood there. For a moment, there was only silence, a mutual shocked recognition. "John?" Lisa whispered, her voice trembling. "Hello, Lisa," John answered softly. "May I come in? We have a lot to talk about." Lisa hesitated for a moment before stepping aside, allowing John in. The apartment was small but cozy, filled with books and photographs. "Why are you here, John?" Lisa asked, her voice a blend of fear and curiosity. John took a deep breath. "Because I finally learned the truth. About you and David. About everything." Lisa's eyes widened, a swirl of emotions crossing her face. "After all these years, why now?" "Because it's time for the truth to come out," John replied. "Lisa, please, tell me everything. I need to know what really happened." Lisa sank into a worn armchair, gesturing for John to sit as well. Then, with a deep sigh, she began her story. "David and I fell in love in college. It was a pure, idealistic love. We wanted to change the world together," she began, a sad smile on her lips. "But his family, they had other plans for him." John listened intently as Lisa recounted the forbidden romance, the pressures from the Thornton family, the dreams she and David had shared. "When I found out I was pregnant, I was over the moon. David was too. We planned to get married, start our own non-profit. But then—" Lisa paused, tears welling in her eyes. "Your mother visited me. She offered me money to disappear, to abort the baby. I refused, of course, but then she threatened to ruin David's career, destroy everything he had worked for." John felt a surge of anger and shame upon hearing what his mother had done. "What happened next?" "I ran," Lisa admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was scared, confused. I thought I was protecting David. Your mother made me believe he'd be better off without me, without the baby." "And the child?" John asked, his heart aching. Lisa glanced at a photo on the wall, a young woman smiling radiantly. "Daniel," she said softly. "I named him in honor of David's father. He's 20 now." In college, John felt as though the air had been knocked from his lungs. His nephew, Daniel, he was real, alive, and well. "Lisa, I'm so sorry. For everything my family did to you, to David, to Daniel." Lisa looked at him, surprised by his sincerity. "John, you didn't know. It wasn't your fault. But now that I do know, I want to make things right," John said firmly. "Lisa, I'd like you and Daniel to come live at the mansion. It's the least I can do to begin making amends." Lisa looked stunned by the offer. "John, I don't know. There's so much history, so much pain." "I know," John nodded. "But there's also a chance for healing, for reconciliation. Daniel deserves to know his family, his heritage." Just then, the apartment door opened and a young man walked in. He was the spitting image of David, with the same intense eyes and charismatic smile. "Mom," he called, stopping short when he saw John. "Who's this?" Lisa stood, tears in her eyes. "Daniel, this is John. He's your uncle." The next few hours were an emotional roller coaster. Daniel, initially shocked and distrustful, listened to the story of his origins, of his father, of the family he'd never known. John, in turn, absorbed every detail about his nephew, marveling at the similarities to David, lamenting everything they had missed. When it was finally time to leave, John repeated his invitation. "Please, consider moving to the mansion. I know it's huge and it's a big decision, but It's a chance to start over, to be a family. Lisa and Daniel exchanged looks, a silent communication passing between them. "We'll think about it," Lisa promised. "It's a lot to process." John nodded, understanding completely. Before leaving, he hugged Lisa and, hesitantly, "Daniel, no matter what you decide, your family, you'll always be welcome." The drive back to the mansion was a whirlwind of emotion for John. Joy at finding Lisa and Daniel, anger at the lies and manipulations of the past, hope for the future. Arriving home, he found Mary waiting anxiously. "Well?" she asked, her face pale with worry. John looked at her for a long moment. "I found them, Mother, Lisa and Daniel. They're fine." Mary let out a sob of relief and guilt. "Oh, John, I'm so sorry for everything." "I know, Mother," John said softly. "But apologizing to me isn't enough. You need to make amends with Lisa and Daniel." Mary nodded, tears trailing down her cheeks. "I'll do whatever it takes, John, to set things right." In the days that followed, the mansion went into a frenzy of preparations. John, determined to do the right thing, initiated the legal process to adopt the twins. Emily and Sophia, still grappling with the truth about John's company's involvement in their family's eviction, watched everything with a mixture of confusion and hope. "What do you think will happen now?" Sophia asked Emily one night as they prepared for bed. Emily shrugged thoughtfully. "I'm not sure, but John's trying to fix things. That has to count for something, right?" A week after the initial meeting, Lisa and Daniel arrived at the mansion. The air was charged with tension and anticipation. Mary, visibly trembling, approached Lisa. "Lisa, there are no words to express how sorry I am. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but—" Lisa raised a hand, cutting her off. "Mary, what you did was unforgivable, but I'm here for Daniel's sake so he can know his family. Maybe in time we can find a path toward reconciliation." John watched the scene, his heart heavy yet filled with hope. He turned to Daniel, who was looking around with a mix of fascination and discomfort. "Welcome to your home, Daniel," John said softly. "I know it's a lot to take in, but I hope that, over time, you'll feel like part of this family." Daniel nodded, a small smile forming on his lips. "Thank you, Uncle John. I think I'd like that." The following weeks were a period of adjustment for everyone. The mansion, once so formal and cold, began to transform. Rooms were redecorated, common areas rearranged to accommodate the new family dynamics. John balanced his time between looking after his newly expanded family and restructuring the company. He was determined to turn it into something David would have approved of, focused on ethical and sustainable projects. Emily and Sophia, initially reserved with the newcomers, soon found themselves fascinated by Daniel. He became the older brother they'd never had, always ready with a story or advice. Lisa, in turn, found renewed purpose. With John's support, she began planning the non-profit she and David had once dreamed of creating years ago. Mary, amid her painful path to redemption, devoted herself to caring for little one, as though being a better grandmother could somehow make up for her past mistakes. It wasn't easy. There were tense days, moments of doubt, and old wounds that sometimes reopened. But there was also laughter echoing in the corridors, lively family dinners where everyone shared their stories, and quiet nights where love and forgiveness seemed possible. A month after Lisa and Daniel's arrival, John gathered everyone in the living room. "Family," he began, the word carrying new weight and meaning. "I know it's been a tough journey for us all, but I want you to know how proud I am of how everyone has tried to make this work." He turned to Emily and Sophia. "Girls, I know it was a shock to discover the company's involvement in what happened to your families, but I promise you, we're working to make it right. And if you'll allow me, I'd like to officially adopt you both." The twins exchanged glances, tears shimmering in their eyes, before running to hug John. "Yes," they cried in unison. John, his voice thick with emotion, turned to Daniel. "As for you, Dan, I know you're an adult now, but I want to officially recognize you as David's son, my nephew, and a rightful heir to the Thornton family." Daniel, usually so composed, found his voice faltering. I'd be honored, Uncle John." Lisa watched with silent tears trailing down her cheeks. John approached her, taking her hands in his. "Lisa, I can't change the past. I can't bring David back or erase what you went through. But I promise that from now on, you and Daniel will always have a place in this family." Lisa nodded, unable to speak through her tears. Mary, standing in a corner, took a hesitant step forward. "I know I don't deserve to be part of this," she said softly. "But if you'll allow me, I'd like to spend the rest of my days trying to make amends. Being the mother and grandmother I should have been all along." There was a moment of tense silence before Daniel, surprising everyone, approached Mary. "Grandma," he said, the word sounding strange but not unpleasant, "we have a long road ahead." "But I think we can try," Mary sobbed, pulling Daniel into a hug. He hesitated for a moment but returned it. John glanced around the room at this imperfect, unlikely family. There was still much to resolve, many wounds to heal. But for the first time in a long while, he felt genuine hope for the future. "Well," he said, a smile spreading across his face, "I think it's time we celebrate. How about a family dinner?" And so, amid laughter and a few tears, the new Thornton family headed to the dining room, ready to begin the next chapter of their lives together. The mansion, once cold and full of secrets, now buzzed with new energy, the sound of hearts healing, of bonds growing stronger, of a family finally finding its way home. John knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There was still much work to be done, both in the family and in the company. But looking at the faces around the table, Emily and Sophia laughing with little one, Daniel talking enthusiastically with Lisa, even Mary smiling timidly, he felt that together they could face any challenge. The future, once so dark and uncertain, now shone with possibilities, and John was eager to see what it held for his new, imperfect, wonderful family. Morning sunlight filtered into the Thornton mansion's living room, illuminating the anxious and emotional faces of everyone present. It was the day Emily and Sophia had been waiting for, the official finalization of their adoption by John. John, dressed in his best suit, held the twins' hands as the judge read the final documents. Emily and Sophia, wearing identical dresses chosen especially for the occasion, could barely contain their excitement. "By the power vested in me," the judge declared solemnly, "I hereby declare Emily and Sophia Thornton as the legal daughters of John Thornton. Congratulations to all." The room erupted in applause and joyful tears. John knelt, hugging the girls tightly. "Welcome officially to the family, my dears," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. Lisa, Daniel, and Mary looked on, their own eyes brimming with tears. Little one, in Lisa's arms, clapped cheerfully, not fully understanding what was happening, but caught up in the joy around him. After the ceremony, the family gathered in the mansion's garden for a more intimate celebration. John had prepared a special surprise, a small memorial ceremony in honor of David and Emily and Sophia's parents. In the shade of an old oak tree, John lit 4 candles. "Today," he began, his voice soft but steady, "we're not only celebrating new beginnings, but also honoring those who are no longer with us physically, yet live on in our hearts." Emily and Sophia stepped forward, each holding a photograph of their parents. With tearful eyes but brave smiles, they placed the photos beside the candles. "Mom, Dad," Emily said softly, "I hope you're proud of us. We have a new family now, but we'll never forget you." Daniel, in turn, placed a photo of David alongside the others. "Dad," he murmured, "I never knew you, but through the stories and love of this family, I feel like I'm finally getting to." Lisa joined him, wrapping an arm around his shoulders. "David would be so proud of you, Dan," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Of all of us." Mary watched from a short distance, her face a mixture of emotions. John, noticing her unease, extended his hand. "Come, Mother," he said gently. "You're part of this too." Hesitantly, Mary joined the family circle. "David," she said quietly, "I know I made so many mistakes, but I promise I'll do all I can to honor your memory and care for the family you loved so much." As the family stood in respectful silence, a soft breeze rustled the leaves of the oak tree, as if nature itself acknowledged the sacredness of the moment. In the months that followed, the Thornton mansion continued its transformation, not just physically, but in spirit. Laughter from the children echoed down the corridors, and family meals became precious moments of connection and sharing. Daniel, now firmly established in his identity as a Thornton, thrived in his college studies. He often brought friends to the mansion, filling the house with the energy and excitement of youth. "You know," he told John one night as they shared a quiet moment in the office, "I never thought I'd have this, a family, a legacy." John smiled, feeling a surge of pride and affection for his nephew. "You've always had it, Dan. We just needed to find our way back to each other." Under John's leadership, the company underwent a radical transformation. Inspired by David's ideals and driven by a desire to right past wrongs, he shifted the focus of Thornton Industries to sustainable and socially responsible projects. The Oakwood project, once responsible for so much suffering, was completely overhauled. Instead of forced evictions and luxury developments, John implemented a community-driven renewal program that prioritized original residents and created public spaces. "This is how we honor David's memory," John declared in a board meeting. "Not just by making profits, but by truly making a difference in people's lives." Emily and Sophia, now secure in their new home and identity, began to flourish at their new school. Their grades improved, and they made new friends. Most importantly, they showed signs of overcoming the traumas of the past. One afternoon, Sophia surprised everyone by bringing home a certificate from the school science fair. "First place," she announced proudly, displaying her project on water conservation. John hugged her, his heart swelling with joy. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart." "Your parents would be too." Emily, not wanting to be outdone, threw herself into her studies with renewed determination. She discovered a gift for writing and began working on a book about her and her sister's journey. "I want other kids to know that no matter how hard things seem, there's always hope," she explained to John one evening, showing him her drafts. Lisa, for her part, found new purpose in family and community. With John's support, she finally made real the dream she had once shared with David, founding a non-profit dedicated to helping families in vulnerable situations. "It's as if a part of David lives on through this work," she confided to John one day, eyes shining with tears of both joy and nostalgia. Mary, determined to redefine her role in the family, devoted herself to being the best grandmother possible. She spent hours reading to little one, helping the twins with homework, and giving gentle advice to Daniel. One day, while helping Emily with a family history project, Mary paused, looking thoughtfully at the girl. "You know, Emily," she said quietly, "I've made many mistakes in the past, but having you, Sophia, and Daniel in my life, it's a second chance I never thought I'd have." Emily smiled, taking her grandmother's hand. "Everyone deserves a second chance, Grandma." As months turned into a year, then two, the Thornton mansion became truly a home. The once cold walls were now adorned with family photos, children's drawings, and reminders of happy moments shared. On a sunny Sunday afternoon, the family gathered in the garden for a picnic. John watched the scene with a full heart. Emily and Sophia running around with little one, now a lively 3-year-old, Daniel and Lisa chatting animatedly about the non-profit's latest project, and Mary comfortably knitting in a garden chair, occasionally laughing at the children's antics. "Who would have guessed," John murmured to himself, "that from so much pain and so many secrets, we could create something so beautiful?" Lisa, noticing his distant look, approached him. "What are you thinking about, John?" He smiled, taking her hand. "How blessed we are. How, despite everything, we found our way back to each other." Lisa nodded, tears of gratitude filling her eyes. David would be so proud of all of us. At that moment, as though summoned by the mention of his father, Daniel joined them. "Hey, what are we celebrating here?" John laughed, pulling his nephew into a side hug. "Life, Dan. We're celebrating life and family." The twins, sensing a special moment, ran over to join the hug, dragging Mary and little one along. There, under the autumn sun, the Thornton family remained together, their bonds strengthened by the trials they had faced and overcome. They weren't perfect. There were still moments of pain, doubt, and old wounds sometimes reopened, but they were bound by love, understanding, and the determination to build a better future. John looked at the sky, thinking of David and the twins' parents, of all those who were gone but whose love still guided them. "Thank you," he whispered to the breeze, "for showing us the way home." And so, surrounded by the love of this once improbable but precious family, John Thornton knew that no matter what the future held, they would face it together. The mansion, once a symbol of secrets and solitude, now pulsed with life, love, and hope. It was more than a house, it was a home. A home for healed hearts, rekindled dreams, and a family that had found its way through darkness to emerge stronger and more united than ever. And as the sun set on the horizon, painting the sky gold and pink, the Thornton family remained together, their laughter and conversation echoing through the garden. A living testament that with love, forgiveness, and courage, even the most broken hearts can be mended, and the saddest stories can have happy endings. The Thornton mansion shone under the summer sun, its newly polished windows reflecting the light like diamonds. Colorful flags and balloons swayed in the gentle breeze, announcing the celebration about to begin. It was Daniel's first birthday since reuniting with his family, a milestone symbolizing not just his personal growth, but also a year of profound change for all the Thorntons. John stood on the veranda, watching the final preparations for the party, his heart filled with an indescribable emotion at the sight of Emily and Sophia running through the garden, enthusiastically helping decorate. Just a year ago, these same girls were two lost souls in the rain. Now, they were an integral part of the family, their laughter echoing across the estate like music. "Penny, for your thoughts," came Lisa's gentle voice, interrupting his reverie. She joined him on the veranda, a kind smile on her face. John smiled back. "Just reflecting on how much has changed in a year. Sometimes it feels almost like a dream." Lisa nodded, her gaze drifting to Daniel, who was helping set up a large tent in the garden. "I know exactly what you mean. There were times I thought we'd never have this, a family, a home." Mary's arrival cut their conversation short. The older woman carried a large, decorated box, her eyes shining with barely contained excitement. "The cake is here," she announced, "and I have a special surprise for Daniel." John and Lisa exchanged amused looks. Mary's road to redemption had been long and sometimes painful, but her commitment to being a loving grandmother was undeniable. As guests began to arrive, Daniel's college friends, John's colleagues, families helped by Lisa's nonprofit, the mansion came alive with cheerful chatter and laughter. At the center of the garden, a small platform had been set up. John climbed onto it, clearing his throat for attention. "Friends, family," he began, his voice brimming with emotion. "We're here today not just to celebrate Daniel's birthday, but to mark a year of incredible transformations in our lives." He paused, his eyes scanning the beloved faces around him. "A year ago, we were strangers, separated by secrets and misunderstandings. Today, we stand united as a family, and not only that." John gestured for Emily and Sophia to join him on the platform. The girls climbed up, their faces radiant with happiness. "Today, I'm pleased to announce that Emily and Sophia Thornton's adoption is officially complete. They are, both legally and in our hearts, my daughters." The crowd burst into applause and cheers. The twins hugged John tightly, tears of joy in their eyes. "But that's not all," John continued once the cheers subsided. "In honor of the man who inspired much of this change, my brother David, we are inaugurating the David Thornton Foundation for Families in Need." Lisa stepped forward to join John on the platform. "This foundation," she explained, her voice trembling slightly with emotion, "will provide support, shelter, and opportunities for families in difficult situations. It's our way of ensuring that no child will ever have to go through what Emily and Sophia endured." The ensuing ovation was deafening. Daniel, tears in his eyes, hugged his mother and uncle, overwhelmed by the tribute to the father he'd never known. As the afternoon wore on, the celebration became more intimate. Friends and acquaintances left, leaving only the immediate family. Sitting in a circle in the garden, each family member shared reflections on the past year. Emily spoke about finding her voice through writing, her book on resilience nearly ready for publication. Sophia talked about her newly discovered love of science, her eyes shining as she described her future projects. Lisa spoke about the healing she found by helping other families, feeling she was honoring David's memory every day. Mary, with tears in her eyes, expressed her gratitude for the second chance she'd been given, vowing to keep striving to be the best grandmother and mother she could be. Daniel reflected on how finding his family had changed his perspective on life, giving him a sense of belonging he never knew he was missing. Finally, John spoke, his voice thick with emotion. That stormy night, when two little girls knocked on my door, I had no idea how my life would change. All of you taught me the true meaning of family, of love, of forgiveness. He paused, looking at each beloved face. We've weathered storms, fought our own demons, but we've emerged stronger, more united. This mansion, which was once a symbol of secrets and loneliness, is now a home in the truest sense of the word. John's words were met with hugs and shared tears. The Thornton family, once fragmented and lost, now stood complete. Epilogue. 1 year later, the sun set over the Thornton mansion, painting the sky in gold and pink hues. In the garden, a familiar scene played out. Emily, now a published young author, read excerpts from her new book to an attentive Sophia, who occasionally interjected with thoughtful questions about the creative process. Daniel, recently graduated and about to begin his own project at the David Thornton Foundation, played catch with little one, their laughter echoing around the garden. Lisa and John sat on the veranda, watching the scene with contented smiles. Lisa's hand rested gently on her slightly rounded belly. Yet another member of the Thornton family was on the way. Mary, in her favorite rocking chair, knitted a tiny pair of booties, her face serene and full of love. The mansion, once a symbol of sorrow and secrecy, now pulsed with life and affection. Where walls once echoed emptily, laughter, conversation, and the sound of a united family now filled every space. John looked at the sky, thinking of David, of Emily and Sophia's parents, of everyone who had guided them to this moment. Thank you, he whispered to the breeze, for showing us the way back home. And so, surrounded by the love of this precious, once unlikely family, the Thornton family continued their journey, facing the future with open hearts and renewed hope. The circle was complete, yet their story was far from over. It was only the beginning of a new chapter, brimming with promises, love, and the certainty that, together, they could overcome any obstacle.